Today we're talking blurbs, author endorsements, editorial reviews, the quotes that you find on the front of books, on the back of books, sometimes inside books from established authors you might have heard of that tell you, hey, because this author liked this book, you might too. Hi, I'm Kayla. Thank you for coming back to my channel for another kind of dull spreadsheet creating video where I look at all the authors who've blurbed my favorite books and talk about if I've read from them before. Channel member Sarah gave me this video idea. I think the idea is typically authors who blurb books are in a similar space, right? The goal when you're getting someone to blurb your book is that they are the top of your genre, the top of your field, and they're there to endorse what you have written because maybe it's kind of similar to theirs. I thought today we would hone in on a specific part of my bookshelf, the fantasy, sci-fi, horror weirdness, to see what authors in that space maybe I haven't heard of. And we're just gonna create a good old spreadsheet. Let's start with, I have 60 books here, so let's do 10 at a time. This stack first, because I feel like they're pretty established all-time favorites of mine or recent favorites of mine. So first up, we've got How We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. This one doesn't have like one on the front. Maybe it's because it would compete with what's happening here. Sometimes I feel like authors just don't have enough blurbs to pop one on here, or maybe a really prolific author that they want to feature. I don't think that's true with this one though, because the entire back is all blurbs. So we've got Kevin Wilson, who I have read a book from that I'm just about to talk about. We've got Alan Moore, who I've never heard of, Chloe Benjamin. Oh, it does say the book that they're known for. So that's The Immortalists. I haven't read. We've got a Gabrielle Zevin one. So Tomorrow. We have a quote from Samantha Shannon. Haven't read. Benjamin Percy. Haven't heard of. Erica Swiler. Haven't heard of. Matt Bell, who I haven't heard of, and Matthew Salesis. I'm so sorry for all of the pronunciations that are to come. So now the idea is, since I have read this book and loved this book, I should now go ahead and read from all of these authors. This could be an entire TBR on its own. Seeing as the only author I know in here is Kevin Wilson, let's just read a quick one. I feel like blurbs sometimes are just like 2 words, and sometimes they are entire paragraphs. So he said the word wondrous, it made him dizzy, it's about humanity and tenderness. It's an amazing book, one to keep close as we imagine the uncertain future. That's a perfect blurb. There's also one on the inside flap. So is this like more important real estate or on the back? I'm not sure. I guess this because you're opening it to read this. So Amy Bender, who I haven't heard of, also has one in here. So I'll go ahead and pop all of these authors into the spreadsheet because maybe the books they just mentioned are similar. Then we've got Middle Game. So Middle Game, on the back, we've got Becky Chambers, who I have read from. Actually, I DNF'd Becky Chambers. Then we've got Charlene Harris. I don't know who that is. Paul Cornwell, don't know who that is. And V.E. Schwab, who obviously I know. You would think that the V.E. Schwab would be like the main focus, just in my mind. However, I will note that these blurbs are just for Sean and McGuire, not for this specific book. The one at the top, Becky Chambers, is saying that McGuire has an uncanny knack for taking the worst things that lurk in the shadows and weaving them into an absolute delight. But the rest of these are focused on just her as an author, or are talking about Every Heart a Doorway, which is lucky that I also enjoy, so I can consider these endorsements. Now this book, interestingly, doesn't have the book that the people are known for, so that doesn't help me out, but we're adding those people to the spreadsheet. Next up, we have We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Berry, which I'm reading soon in a members specific mini Lullathon readathon where we all read my favorite things. From here, our advanced praise on the back just comes from publications. So Kirkus Reviews, Los Angeles Times, New York Times Book Review, so that's interesting. No authors to note here. Speaking of Kevin Wilson, we have Nothing to See Here, which was a recent favorite of mine. On the back, the one at the top is by Taffy Brodesser Ackner from the New York Times Book Review, so that's not an author. Then we also have Boston Globe, Entertainment Weekly, Washington Post, People, USA Today. So again, a bunch of publications. Although we do have an endorsement or a sticker from Read with Jenna, I have no idea who that is, and I really don't like the sticker. But I guess her book club is as important as like Reese and Oprah, because I see this on a lot of books. Next up, we've got the Pallbearers Club. With the unpopularity of this, I feel like I should take these author endorsements more seriously. So at the very top, we've got Stephen Graham Jones, of course, a favorite author of mine. Books can have teeth, a whole mouthful of them, but the Pallbearers Club has a whole lifetime of them. That's interesting. Oh, we've also got Grady Hendrix here. And then we do have one right on the front from Karen Russell. Interesting that I haven't heard of that author, but the two on the back I would consider pretty popular horror authors, so that's my bad. Maybe it's just because Karen's is more unique. For a book that looks death squarely in its sightless eye, this one is just brimming over with life and inventiveness. Let's move on to House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. We've got a whole bunch on the back, from Simone St. James, who said this was gorgeous and lushly dark, to Francesca May, who I haven't read from, but I recognize her name, Hannah Witten, who I haven't read from, but I recognize her name, Eric LaRocca, who I've read, N.E. Davenport, Isabella Conyas, who I have read from, Rachel Harrison, interesting, Genevieve Gornichek, and S.T. Gibson, who I have read from. I recently did a video where I read like a Goodreads article of authors who recommended other books, and Alexis Henderson recommended Rachel Harrison. So remind me to come back to this thought after we focused on these 10. Next up, since Stephen Graham Jones just blurbed one, I also have a Stephen Graham Jones in my stack, My Heart is a Chainsaw. We've got a blurb from NPR on the front, and on the back we've got one from Alma Katsu. You don't have to be a slasher fan to read My Heart is a Chainsaw, but I guarantee you will be one after you read it. So that is the only one, I believe, unless there's some in the front. I don't think so. Let's take a look at Bunny now. And we've got a bunch on the back. The description is on the inside jacket. And these all seem to be from not authors that I would associate with this style of book. So that's interesting. We've got Lena Dunham, Christine Rupenian, Laura Vanderberg, and Sarah Shun-Lin Bynum. I'm sure there are similar themes to these books, but I wouldn't consider them, from what they sound like, to be in the same genre, but we will add them to the spreadsheet. Then we've got The Book of the Most Precious Substance by Sarah Gran. On the back, we've got Paul Tremblay and Stephen Graham Jones, people who we've already seen. Oh, and inside, there are so many more. So Lauren Bukes, who just said, I fucking loved it. And then people from publications. Oh, Mark C. Danielewski blurbed this. Oh, that's praise for Sarah Gran's other books. And I mean, I haven't read a Sarah Gran I haven't liked, so we could consider these. Laura Lippman, George Pelecanos, Attica Locke, William Boyle, and Kara Hoffman. And then speaking of Mark C. Danielewski, the 10th one in my stack, these are all, as expected, from publications, because this is kind of a unique story. I wouldn't have really expected there to be blurbs at all, actually. But we've got words like ambitious and complicated, nothing like you've ever read before. Absolutely true. Now, I don't work in publishing. I don't know anything about the blurb process, but from what I hear other people talk about, they talk about the fact that blurbs tend to come from relationships. A lot of times they come from your friends in the industry. They come from people who you're already a critique partner with, or that you share an agent. Relationships and connections tend to be where a lot of blurbs come from. You blurb my book, I'll blurb yours. So there is a conversation to be had about privilege, maybe what trajectory your publishing house already thinks is likely for you, the type of setup that you have, the connections that have been built by you or for you. There's often likely more authors out there who would enjoy your work, but maybe they didn't even have the time or the opportunity to read your book. I'm sure there are certain authors who are just more likely to say yes to giving a blurb, or are well known for blurbing books. So sometimes some authors, since you see their names so rarely, you maybe take their endorsement even more seriously, because it's like, oh, this author who I never see blurb books, but they are so well known, I absolutely have to pick this one up, because it's few and far between that they endorse something. Then there are authors who are seen blurbing like everything and anything because they just love books and love the genre and want to contribute and want to bring people up with them. And I'm not here to question any legitimacy about book blurbs. It's just interesting to see the authors who are featured. So for the next 10, let's focus on authors that we just heard from, or authors I've already featured. So The Hacienda by Isabel Conyas has one on the front from Rachel Hawkins, which is an interesting one, not a genre author that I would consider. And then let's see, the back we've got a lot. Okay, Simone St. James again. Haven't read from still. Alexi Harrow, who I have read from. Roshani Chokshi, read from. S.A. Chakraborty, haven't heard of. Alexis Henderson, okay. Genevieve Gornichek, again, interesting. Hannah Witten again, Rachel Harrison again, and Daniel Abraham, who I haven't heard of. Alexis Henderson says lush, sinister, and darkly romantic. I think I like the blurbs that specifically talk about actually reading the book, their experience with the book, rather than just descriptive words. So S.A. Chakraborty says a haunting, gorgeous tale of doomed love, vengeful spirits, and tortured faith that I could not put down. I want to hear that you actually read it. I want to hear I couldn't put it down. I want to hear I endorse this. Genevieve Gornichek said it's impossible to put down. A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. We've got Hannah Witten again, Lyndall Clipstone, and Genevieve Gornichek. I do recognize the title, The Witch's Heart, but I haven't picked it up. Also in this one, they say I couldn't put it down. Now Eric LaRocca blurbed something that we listed, but I don't think this one has any blurbs on the front and back, but there is at the beginning. I have another one from them somewhere on my shelves, but this says praise for Eric LaRocca just in general, so it could be their other books. Chuck Wendig blurbed this one. Daniel Kraus, I haven't read from. I have read from Chuck Wendig. Tyler Jones, who I haven't read from. And that's that in here. Then I know we saw Grady Hendrix mentioned. My favorite from him is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. And all of these ones are from review publications. And then all of the prizes inside. And that's that for this one. Here's the thing, some authors don't need blurbs. I mean, if we look at V.E. Schwab, there are no blurbs here. Let's check. Okay, the back, she's got blurbs. Neil Gaiman, Naomi Novik. I have read from Neil Gaiman, not Naomi Novik. Have read from Alex E. Harrow, and Peng Shepherd blurbed, which is interesting. Also, Naomi Novik's is in the front cover. Okay, then we're revisiting Paul Tremblay. Who else is here? Caroline Kepnes blurbed this one. Stephen King blurbed Paul Tremblay. Victor Laval, who I've read, and Stuart Onan, who I have not. Stephen King says it's tremendous, thought-provoking, and terrifying with tension that winds up like a chain. We've got another Seanan McGuire. On the front cover is Charlene Harris, who blurbed this, just saying she's one of the smartest authors around. Then we've got Paul Cornell, author of London Falling and Witches of Lynchford, which I have not read. Come Closer by Sarah Gran. The front cover features Bret Easton Ellis, who is an author I've heard of, but I haven't read anything from them. And then on the back is a quote from Darren Strauss, who I also have not read from. Oh, and then on the inside, we've got Margot Livesey and George Pelicanos. I think we just saw his name. Stuart Onan, Sam Lipsyte, who, if you can't tell, are people I don't know. We've got Alexis Henderson again, The Year of the Witching. So many on the back. I see Seanan McGuire right away saying this is beautiful, powerful, important, and I hugely recommend it. That's what I want to hear. I endorse this, not just a couple words. Danielle Clayton also blurbed it. Tamora Pierce, S.A. Chakraborty again, Louisa Morgan, Shay Earnshaw, who I've read from, Rena Barron, Fonda Lee, who I've yet to read from, but I should. Amanda Lovelace, who I haven't, Christina Henry, who I have, and Tasha Suri. And then in the front flap, we've got one from Emily A. Duncan saying she wanted to sink into this world and never leave. Another Stephen Graham Jones with The Only Good Indians. On the very front says A Masterpiece by Paul Tremblay. And Tommy Orange, who I have read from, said more than I could have ever asked for in a novel. And on the inside, one from Therese Marie Mailot, who I do not know. Oh gosh, and on the back, we have even more. Let's see, Josh Mallerman. This is the first time we've seen Josh Mallerman blurb one. Also Victor Laval and Rebecca Roanhorse and Shanna Reeve Dew, all authors I've read from before and who are in the stack to come. So the thing about me, obviously with the exception of right now in this moment in this video, I don't really read blurbs. Maybe I'll pay attention to the one on the front cover, but I'm not so much what it says, but just who it is because I find it interesting. Maybe I'll point it out if I'm hauling a book, but I am not ever going to be swayed by a blurb, the words themselves or who the author is, if I wasn't already interested in the book. Maybe it would be different if I read like 10 books a year and I didn't really, like I wasn't part of the community, I didn't have a Goodreads, I wasn't well informed about upcoming releases, and I was just going to the bookstore trying to figure out what I wanted to read, and I didn't want to sit there and read so much of a synopsis of a book, maybe the blurb would intrigue me. Because the thing is, I also don't know an author's taste. So the fact that I've only seen Stephen King's name once and Josh Malerman's name once definitely pings something in my brain that's like, these are few and far between, so these are big endorsements. But it could just be that they are the ones who are blurbing books that I don't like, and these are just like the 1 or 2 cases where they blurbed something that I do. So let's move on. Who has blurbed Josh Malerman? Hugh Howey. No idea who this is on the front of Bird Box. The thing that I think about sometimes is, are there ever re-blurbs that happen? Like, if on the 5th printing of Bird Box, because I have like a first edition, is it gonna have different blurbs than a future one? Because maybe it didn't have a lot of hype when it first came out, but then it got the movie adaptation. And now he's had more things that are popular. So do authors talk about those things and they get blurbs on future books? I don't know. On this one, we have publications, not specific people. And that's the same for inside praise as well. So nothing on A House at the Bottom of the Lake, which I think makes sense because this was not a traditional publisher, I don't think. We saw Christina Henry's name and I really liked Near the Bone. So on hers, we've got Rachel Harrison. Because I've already given Rachel Harrison like a 2-star and a 3-star and a 4-star, I think I can already surmise that like author blurbs don't mean that I'm automatically gonna love books that the authors who have blurbed the books have written. But we also have Paul Tremblay on the back of this one, and Christopher Golden. Tananarive Due, we've got a couple things here. The Good House and The Between have been blurbed by Peter Straub, who I definitely know. And I think that's it, which is disappointing. There are some publications, but I think Tananarive Due is objectively a great horror author that should probably have even more well-established authors blurbing her books. Although it has been a while since she's published something, so maybe let's keep an eye on her 2023 or 2024 book release. I can't remember when it's coming out, to see if there's any more authors featured on it, though she should be able to speak for herself and doesn't need somebody else to feature her. Nothing from Brandon Massey. Let's check on Brom, who we've got Mallory O'Meara, who I do not know, Clay McLeod Chapman, who wrote Whispers Down the Lane, which is on my TBR. Definitely I need the title of books that the authors have written to recognize who they are. Christopher Buhlman and Richard Kadri, and Andy Davidson, who I have read from and didn't absolutely love. So there's that. I love watching when an author has a blurb on the front cover of a book and then their next book or a couple books down the line, the blurb is not there and it's just best-selling author, and it's talking about, like, it's blurbing your own book. That's when you know you've made it. So on Station 11, we've got a blurb from Erin Morgenstern. I really did enjoy The Night Circus, so that's good to note. Patrick DeWitt blurbed this one, Emma Straub, Laura Bukes again, Liza Klossman, Jessie Burton, who are people I haven't read from, and that's all in here. Then we've got Sea of Tranquility, and this one is a bunch of publications and no specific authors. Interesting. Let's go with Reprieve by James Hahn Matson. On the front, we've got Keith Lehman, who blurbed an eventual American classic that is unrelenting in its beauty and incisive cultural critique. Hey, and then we have Rumaan Alam on the back, Leave the World Behind author. Loved that book. And Jung Yun, author of Shelter. Angie Kim, author of Miracle Creek, which I really liked. And Steph Cha, who I haven't heard from. And then on the inside flap, T. Geronimo Johnson. So let's grab Leave the World Behind and see who blurbed this one. This is a large print edition, so maybe the blurbs are missing from the back or the front, or there was never any. I don't know. I am also only considering like the physical copy I have in my hand, because if I Googled them, I'm sure I would find 10,000 other blurbs, and that would just make this all the more chaotic. Next up, we've got The Mare of Thieves by Sherry Dimeline, which is blurbs from publications and reviewers. We have Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wabgisha Grice. On the very front, Eden Robinson said chilling in the best way possible. And then we have quotes from the author Kevin Hardcastle and Richard Van Camp, who I have read from. Split Tooth by Tanya Tagaq has no blurbs. Hours Under the Sea by Julia Armfield is next. We have a quote from Sarah Waters on the front. Wonderful novel, deeply romantic, fabulously strange. Perfect way to describe it. And then Daisy Johnson and Megan Hunter have very short blurbs on the inside. And on the back, we've got more from Neil Mukherjee, Florence Welch, which is interesting, Kirsty Logan, Kieran Millwood Hargrave, Sarvat Hassan, and Kristen Arnett, who don't have any books attached. So I don't know who, I don't think I've read from any of these people. Moving on to Sorrowland by River Solomon. Marlon James, Roxane Gay, definitely heard of these people. P.J. Clark, absolutely. And then who I haven't read from, Nicola Griffin and Jordy Rosenberg. And then on the inside, Charlie Jane Anders, who I have definitely heard of, and I have books on my TBR that I haven't read from. So this spreadsheet, I can already tell, is getting absolutely out of control. Now we've got Catherine M. Valenti, who I feel like is a pretty well-established author who I would have expected to see their name on other books that we've talked about, because I feel like I have read blurbs from them before. So we've got blurbs from Christopher Golden, Roshani Chokshi again, Cassandra Kaw, interesting, and Melissa Albert, who I definitely know. Woman Eating by Claire Coda. On the very front, we have Ruth Ozeki, who I've definitely heard from but not read. And then Lisa Harding, author of Jenna's book club pick, Bright Burning Things. So it's not just saying who the author is and what the book is, but even that it was selected for this book club that I know nothing about. Who is Jenna? Do you all know? Next up, Riot Baby by Tochio Nobuchi. On the very front, Marlon James says, bursts at the seams of story with fire, passion, and power. And on the back, we have Cory Doctorow, Sarah Gailey, who I've read from, Marlon James, Hanif Abdurraqib, Mark Oshiro, whose name I recognize, and R.F. Kwong, whose name I recognize. And then on the inside, Danielle Jose Older says it's an epic ode to the future and past. What I would have assumed going into this is that authors would have shown up more often. There's a lot more authors than I thought there would be. The Test by Sylvain Neuvel doesn't have any blurbs, and The Murders of Molly Southbourne does. We've got a Stephen Graham Jones quote right there. This premise fleshes out the strangeness and the grace of the human condition as well as anything I've read. It's interesting how sometimes author blurbs don't sound like endorsements. It's not like this is his favorite book, but he's like, it's as good as anything else I've read. Maybe I'm just reading it differently, but that's the blurb you chose when Elizabeth Bear, Cassandra Kaw, Stephanie Salter, Simon Bestwick, John Courtney Grimwood have all blurbed it and called it inventive, chilling, disturbing, fascinating, chillingly absurd. Gotta love how people talk about Today Thompson. Next up, Tinfoil Butterfly by Rachel Eve Moulton. We have quotes on the back from Jack Gems, who I just read the grip of it from, Araminta Hall, who I did have a book on my TBR at one point from them, Julia Heberlin, who I don't know, and Shirley Barrett, who I don't know. You know what? This video is serving for a completely different purpose than I even thought. It's just making me aware of so many names that I feel like I should know who they are. Severance by Ling Ma has a lot of editorial kind of reviews and no authors on the front and back. But then on the inside, there are pages and pages of quotes. So the couple authors that you see amongst the editorial ones, are there any? No, they're all from Booklist, Chicago Tribune, The Millions, HuffPost. Okay, let's pull up The Other Side of Night by Adam Hamdy, which has a blurb from Anthony Horowitz, who I definitely have read from. We've got Stuart Turton, who I've read from, Matthew Sullivan, who I haven't, John Connolly, who I haven't, Liv Constantine, whose name I recognize, J.T. Ellison, T.A. Wilberg, oh, Peter Swanson. That's the first time we've seen Peter Swanson. I think I just pulled all of the speculative kind of stuff. Thriller and mystery would have a completely different list of authors. Karen Slaughter blurbed this as well, and Joseph Finder. Authors I have heard of, authors I haven't. James Patterson is in here. That's interesting too. I think it checks out that crime novelists and mystery novelists have blurbed this one, though it definitely goes into weird territory. The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nevo. Shannon McGuire is on the front and says gorgeous, cruel, perfect. We also have blurbs from R.F. Kwong, who we're seeing more and more, Zen Cho, Aliette de Bodard and Kate Elliott. Kate Elliott sounds really familiar to me. I can't think if I've read anything from that author, but there again is no titles back there, so I cannot confirm or deny if I know their books. Then we have The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey, and we just have publication reviews there, but we also have one from Chuck Wendig that says Sarah Gailey is a writer to watch. That's him basically saying Sarah Gailey's okay. I think maybe they'll do something one day that's incredible. Next up is Tender as the Flesh by Augustina Bazterrica. Christina Dalcher, who wrote Vox, said this book will pull you in, take hold, and not let go until you reach the final page. Without a doubt, my favorite read of the year. That is the perfect blurb. We also have blurbs from Lisa McInerney, Sue Rainsford, awesome, who I love, and Lucy McKnight Hardy, who I don't think I've heard of. Moving on to The Need by Helen Phillips. This is also just a list of all my favorite books, in case I guess you were wondering. These are all 4 and 5 stars. Emily St. John Mandel blurbed this one. Very cool. And then on the back we have Rebecca McKay, Dana Spiotta, and Laura Vanderberg, who I haven't heard of, Alexandra Kleeman, who I also haven't, and Kate Christensen. Oh, but then we also have Lauren Groff on the inside flap. I love Helen Phillips' wild, brilliant, eccentric brain. Next up, let's grab We Spread by Ian Reid, who definitely does not need a blurb on the front. Although we haven't seen, have we seen Ian Reid blurb anything? We do have a blurb from Mona Awad. I think that's the first Mona Awad we've seen. And then David Shuriandi. We also have Alexander Kleeman, who we've seen, and Canicia Lubrin. And then again on the inside flap, Rumaan Alam. The true thrill is in how so slender a book tackles such big questions. Let's get into Kindred by Octavia Butler. On the front we have Harlan Ellison, and on the back there's Walter Mosley, and I think those are the only authors, and then lots of editorial magazines and newspapers. The Cherry Robbers by Saray Walker I grabbed. Also, you know what I'm just thinking of? Like, I'm talking about authors who we haven't seen on a lot of these books, but they might have not, you know, become well-known authors before the books that they could have blurbed like came out. The Cherry Robbers has blurbs from Maria Semple, who I have heard of, Susan Scarf Marin, Stacy Swan, and that's it. Let's get into Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. On the very front is a blurb from Rory Power. I don't know if I mentioned, I specifically grabbed adult titles. I would have grabbed Wilder Girls, but I wanted to keep this to adult because if I'm looking for more recommendations, more books like this, I'm thinking authors of adult fiction are probably recommending adult fiction. I'm not really looking for young adult weirdness right now, but this has been blurbed by Robin Wasserman and Ivy Pachoda. I do have an Ivy Pachoda on my shelves. And Rory Power says, dreamy and brimming with dread, Catherine House will swallow you whole. Next up, The Women Could Fly by Megan Giddings. We have, a quote from Raven Lalani, who I have read Luster. Alexander Kleeman, again, okay, note that. They have a book called Something New Under the Sun, which doesn't sound like weird horror, but it could be. And then we have Jessamine Chan, author of The School for Good Mothers, C. Pam Zhang, Jamie Attenberg, and Adrian Kelt, who are authors I haven't read. I think there's about 10 to go. I'm losing steam. Are you? Is anyone still here? The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker, blurbed again by Emily St. John Mandel. So I think I can take her endorsement. But we also have Karen Russell and Marisha Pessel, who I love, Robin Black, who I haven't read. And that's that for this one. Next, let's do Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. We have a blurb from Stephanie Garber right on the front, who I have not read from, but I'm sure many of you have. Is that going to be the only one in here? See, this is one of those books that I feel like upon reprinting should have perhaps more blurbs because this has gotten more attention the more it's come out. But I just noticed there's one on the back from Genevieve Gornichek. So again, I think she just loves to blurb. Moving on to When the Reckoning Comes by Latanya McQueen. This was blurbed by Rian Amilcar Scott, an author whose name I don't recognize, and then Megan Giddings on the back. Oh, and also Laura Vanderberg. Next up, let's do Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. Just kidding, it's all publications. Into the Forest by Jean Hegland. Now this is an older release, so San Francisco Chronicle does not intrigue me. Neither do all of the other publishing things in the back. But we do have a blurb from Carol Saline, co-author of Sisters, which I feel like maybe I've heard of, and John Keeble, author of Yellowfish. This Thing Between Us by Gus Marino is next. Ooh, we've got Paul Tremblay, who called this he was genuinely creeped out, unsettled, and shaken. An existential, frightening book. Then we have Andy Davidson and Jamie Bradbury, who I haven't read from, and Brian Evanson, who I have not heard of, and Rachel Eve Moulton, author of Tinfoil Butterfly. Oh, also John Langan. Is that the first time we've seen John Langan? Interesting. Dazzling, a fine, fine book. Oh, and Stephen Graham Jones, sorry. The blurbs are like weirdly spaced around the description. Stephen Graham Jones says, this isn't a ride, it's a slide, and it doesn't care whether you're ready or not. When I started this blurb video, I knew that Stephen Graham Jones would be the most blurbed person, and I'm happy to know that I was right because I just see him everywhere. Then we've got Sue Rainsford, who blurbed another thing, Follow Me to Ground. This one has a blurb from Tia Obrecht, I'm so sorry, Daisy Johnson, Megan Mayhew Bergman, who I feel like we saw already, Paul Yoon, and Colin Barrett, people I have not heard of. Let me know if I should read them. Next, let's grab The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. This has a blurb on the front from the New York Times. We don't care about the New York Times. On the back, there's Alex E. Harrow again, Kate Elliott again, and Mary Robinette Cowell, who says, Polk displays an elegant mastery of form, by turns charming and wrenching. Oh, and then there's more in here. Tasha Suri, Fran Wild, Kat Howard, H.G. Perry, and Aliette de Bodard, who I know we've seen already, Melissa Caruso, Emily A. Duncan, who we've seen, and Ellen Cleggs. That was a lot of people. Okay. I wonder what makes publishers, or whoever decides what blurbs are in the book, if they want to have like 20, or if they if they get 3 really good people, like their wish list of people blurbing the book, if they only feature those 3. Like, do they want quality or quantity, or can you have both? Then we've got This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Motar, which is blurred by Madeline Miller. We have not seen Madeline Miller anywhere yet. And then on the back, we have V.E. Schwab. See, these are 2 authors that like, that's all you need to endorse your book. But on the inside flap, there's a whole bunch more. So I guess you can have quality and quantity, because we've got Rebecca Roanhorse in here, whom I love, Martha Wells, who I've read from, Anne Leckie, who I don't know, Kelly Sue DeConnick, and Ryan North. And at this point, just 3 remain, authors we've already seen. So Ring Shout, P.J. Clark. This was blurbed by a bunch of people. Victor Laval, who I have read from, Jonathan Mayberry, River Solomon. I feel like that's the first time we saw River Solomon. Sarah Gailey again. Bethany C. Morrow, first time we've seen her. Annalee Newitz and Tochi Onyebuchi, first time we've seen that author. They used words like revolutionary, imaginative, powerful, propulsive. Absolutely agree. Then Rebecca Roanhorse, author of Trail of Lightning. On the front, Charlene Harris blurbed, as well as Danielle Jose Older. And Kate Elliott again. I still can't remember who this person is. Why is that there's never a book associated. But Danielle Jose Older, I've read short stories from, but not a full-length novel. And then on the back, there. She has written Court of Fives and Black Wolves. And lastly, I guess pop up Madeline Miller for Circe. Anne Patchett recommended it or blurbed it or endorsed it, and Alexandra Alter. And then on the inside flap, we have just some publications, calling it one of the best novels of the year. So I don't disagree. And I guess that's it. This is my spreadsheet. I reorganized it so we can see all the stats together. The darkest color is authors that of my 60 favorite speculative books have been blurbed at least 4 times. Stephen Graham Jones, Paul Tremblay, and then Genevieve Gornichek, who I haven't read from, but I'm totally down to pick up The Witch's Heart. Let's just delete the ones that I have read from to keep track. And then blurbed 3 times, Hannah Witten, Laura Vanderberg, Alexi Harrow, Alexander Kleeman, Charlene Harris, Victor Laval, and Kate Elliott. In my research, I realized that Charlene Harris is the Suki Stackhouse author, so my bad. I've definitely seen Alexander Kleeman's covers around. And Laura Vanderburg has a short story collection that I'm aware of. I know The Third Hotel is her most popular thing, but I hadn't heard of it before now. And then Hannah Witten and Kate Elliott, their YA fantasy things I'm not really that interested in. And then the authors I've blurbed 2 things from. I've read and enjoyed some Rashani Chokshi. This one totally checks out middle grade short stories, and The Last Tale of the Flower Bride is on my TBR. V.E. Schwab also read things under Victoria Schwab. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, of course, is a favorite. I don't know that I currently have anything on my TBR from this author that I am itching to read. I've enjoyed every single Emily St. John Mandel I've read, Rumaan Alam. I've never picked up anything beyond Leave the World Behind, but it's definitely an all-time weird favorite, so that checks out. Chuck Wendig might be the outlier here because I didn't like the Book of Accidents, but I haven't read anything else from him, to be fair. Actually, the same is true for Andy Davidson. Just one read. This one was a 3-star, but I would read from him again. Rachel Harrison, as established, pretty hit or miss. Shannon McGuire, I'm picky about what I pick up from her, but I've enjoyed almost everything, at least written under the name Shannon McGuire. Then we've got, Rebecca Roanhorse. Definitely trust her endorsements, and I enjoy Trail of Lightning and Black Sun. I think Sarah Gailey has gotten every rating under the sun from me. And then Cassandra Kaw, I've just read nothing but Black and Teeth. It really was not for me, but I do plan to pick up The Salt Grows Heavy this year. Removing the ones that I've established, I have already picked up books from before, quite a few of them. I would definitely be interested to read from Daisy Johnson and Lauren Bukes. I actually have books from them on my TBR shelf. I know everyone recommends me Cinnamon St. James, so I would give it a go. I realize Karen Russell is the Swamplandia author, so I don't know. Do you think that would be for me? R.F. Kuang, obviously Babel is on my TBR. Daniel, I don't know why I said Daniel so many times. Listen, I've just been listing author names for 2 hours. Oh, I guess I have read from him, technically. Tasha Suri, I think I thought her series was YA, so I would be intrigued to pick it up if you think I'd like it. I'm not really interested in Emily A. Duncan, George Pelicanos. I do have a Christopher Golden on my TBR. It was actually one of my most anticipated of the year. I don't know that I'm interested in Stuart Onan. I have a Marlon James on my TBR. And Aliat de Bodard, I'd never heard of, but I am intrigued by the premise that I'm seeing on Goodreads. So thank you so much for watching. I don't know who this benefited, and it benefited me because there is definitely some TBR creation happening here, whether it's finding other books that these people have blurbed or if it's reading them themselves, or maybe it's both. But I will see you next time. Thanks so much for being here. Bye.